Pan Samir Ali jest ekonomistą, który pochodzi z Egiptu. Mr. Samir Ali is an economist who comes from Egypt. Zajmuje się teorią systemu światowego, tym głównie kapitalizmem peryferyjnym. He deals with the world's capitalism system and the peripheric system of capitalism. Znany jest z krytyki europocentryzmu i kapitalizmu globalnego. He's known for Europe-centered and global capitalism. W swoich ostatnich pracach wskazuje na to, jak świat
Good evening, dear friends, comrades. I'm very happy to have been invited by you. I'm very thankful for that, and I do regret strongly that unfortunately I cannot be with you for the coming hours and days.
Serdecznie towarzysz z Bułgarii, z Węgier, ze Słowacji, Słowenii. Spektakularnej liczby broni.
It is a really new mass destruction weapon, killing with pauperization and unemployment.
Tu jest wersja tego wiersza.
Shows also the unity of the Tunisian Arab, the Greek και ποιος είπε πως τέλειωσε ο πόλεμος. Μπίλιονες νεκρούς που σου μάθανε να τους αναγνωρίζεις από τα δεδομένα στρατιωτικά νέα. Όμως νεκροί δεν είναι οι στρατιές των ανέργων στα χαρακόμματα το πρωί για δουλειά που δεν βρίσκουν. Στρατιωτικά ρούχα δεν είναι καράκι που περιπέτονται στους δρόμους αναζητώντας ένα κομμάτι ψωμί.
لم تعد الطائرات الحربية تحلق في سمائنا مدوية مدمرة، بل أصبحت أسلحة الدمار تلك البورصات المالية وقوانين النقد الدولي المفقرة لجيوش العاقلين الاحتياطيين. لم تطفئ محارق بوشويك، فهي تتخذ اليوم بأحلام الأطفال وآمالهم التي أصبحت رماد أشلاء بشرية متعفنة. هذا نظامهم يفرز رائحة أجسام تحترق. من قال عن الحرب النهب؟ ولماذا اقتنعتم بذلك؟ لأنكم سمعتم ما يقال في التلفزيون ولم تقرأوا الصحف. افتحوا صفحة الإعلانات وسوف ترون البلاغات العسكرية لضحايا جبهة الحرب الحياة. طالعوا أخبار المنتحرين يأسا والمهاجرين والناشئين بالمحتشدات. اكشفوا عن الخونة المعاصرين المتواطئين مع رؤوس الأموال المتغولة بأسلحة الدمار الاقتصادي للبلدان والشعوب. أخيرا ابحثوا عن المقاومة وعن الذين يرفضون الأدوار التي قررت لهم لأنهم يريدون تقرير مصائرهم بأنفسهم. لم تنتهي الحرب، بل نحن في زمن الحرب.
It's only the consequence of this huge economic capitalist crisis, because if you make the people poor and poor because you don't pay them and you just throw them on the street, then who will buy your things? And this is of course the reason for the crisis and then for the reclamation and war.
The principle, just as important, is support for the right to self-determination for all oppressed peoples.
As you're looking at me, I suppose that I'm the next panelist. I also want to ask for your work, because I like to talk a lot, and so you should advise me after 5 minutes and after 8, and then I will know that I have to conclude. First of all, I want to explain that, according to my opinion, ethnicism, nationalism, which is sounding a very simple-minded issue, but it's not. It's very complicated. It goes all the way down to education when you're young. When you're well educated, you are open to those explanations which are explaining you that ethnicism is something bad. If you're undereducated, you easily accept very bad informations which led many times to wars, crimes, and to hatreds. Right now in my country, I'm coming from Hungary, my name is Gyuri Dropa. We had an education of 18 years. So until 18 years, everybody had to stay in school. And that was free of charge, nobody paid for that education. Right now, the Orban government lowered this education level down to 16 years. And they said that no education like education of history, education of languages, education of the Hungarian language is utterly important. What is important? To know how to use the tools, to be a good worker, to work in a farm, etc. Other type of education are not that of an importance. This means when they are starting up with simple-minded explanations, they will easily believe. Our country is divided into two types of areas. One are the towns, the big towns, and the rural areas. In big towns, the education is higher, and the population is more or less left-oriented. In the rural areas, more simple-minded explanations on these issues are easier to be explained. That is the area where they are getting their votes from. It's a very simple education. We are proud. We are proud people. Why are we proud? Because we are Hungarians, of course. It's a very easy explanation, but they all love it. And they all sing it together. We say the majority is good, the minority is bad. We don't know them, they are strange, and they are dangerous. This went all to the extremes. 5 years ago there were Roma killings. 6 Roma people have been killed in different villages with arms just because they are Romas. They went to the outskirts of the village, they went to the first house, and they killed people there. And also others have been wounded. It's around 12 people. They were heavily beaten, or they were wounded by arms. And of course, the government, the police, and all these institutions should work very hardly on this issue. But it took 5 years. Then the guilties, I'm not sure that they found them all. It took 5 years to put them in prison. What else you have to do in order to keep up this type of thinking, nationalism? First of all, you have to close the local schools. Have to close the local post office. Keep them poor. Keep them dependent. It's also very important that they should not own land. All land should have to be resold, especially to the people which are belonging to the gang, which is the party system which is now ruling our countries. They are selling every little acre of land to these people. they are becoming dependent, they are only able to live and to work on their fields. In these areas, they are avoiding to use ecological agriculture. They are avoiding to organize small farms. Now, big farms, similar to those of the socialist system, when there were collective farms, where everybody had a job and everybody was owner of the collective farm. Now, one person or one group or one family is owning the whole land, and you work there like peasants, which is very sad. They are also using the church, the Catholic Church, because there is a Catholic church in every single village, so they can speak through the same language. If you belong to this government, you belong to the good ones. If you're not, that was your choice. They are also working with the historical heritage. Very important. Those were the brave days between the two world wars. Imagine that there was a discussion 2 weeks ago in Kossuth Club between two famous historians, let's say two well-known historians. One, I would say, famous, the other one is well-known. He's publishing more than anybody else in our country. He explained to us that during Second World War, there was no Red Army winning the war in this section of the world, but there was a civil war where Soviets were fighting against Soviets. And there were no partisan movement because that was very weak and there were only some alcoholistic people wandering around there. And anyhow, the partisans were very much more equipped with weapons and arms than the German army. It sounds very impossible. Not only because we had learned history in a different way. I also must go back to my childhood, because in our school we couldn't know who is belonging to which nationality, who is belonging to which religion, because it was not a question. Even if we knew it, that doesn't matter. Now it matters. And you have to know that we are living in a multi-ethnic society. It always has been multi-ethnic. Together with the Austrians, the Slovaks, the Croats, Serbs, Romanians, there's a strong Polish minority. So there are 9 ethnicities which live together. Of course, they are all whites, with the exception of the Romas, which are a little bit colored. But it was difficult to know who is who, but we were not looking upon this issue, but now they are doing. What they are saying, and what is the official statement of the Prime Minister now, that we are proud people, and we don't want to follow the bad example of Western Europe. We don't want to follow the bad example of the United States of America, where there's a multi-ethnic society. We learn from their past, and we want to go on our track. So they are the bad, and we are the good ones. Orban is running a nationalistic, autocratic regime, and this nationalism is paying for him in votes. Orban is saying that we are preparing for the future. He's a very good friend of Kaczynski, I must say. And they are helping each other. For example, this Monday there will be the 15th of March, which is a national Deliberation Day for Hungary.
Excuse me.
I'm going too fast? I should finish.
I think the second one.
Yes, nie. To jest już w sumie już minęło te 10 minut, dlatego proszę zmierzać do końca.
10 minutes.
Okay. So, I conclude, not only with this is maybe the discussion I can come back, that 3,000–4,000 visitors will come to our festivity to Poland to support Orban. And their trip will be paid fully by the Hungarian government. I hope that someday we will also work together and Polish leftist people will come to our country to celebrate our freedom. Thank you.
Is it okay if I stay seated? Okay, thank you. Thank you. My name, again, is Anna Edwards, and I'm with an organization in the United States called the Defenders for Freedom, Justice, and Equality. The specific project that we work on is called the Sacred Ground Historical Reclamation Project. And I place emphasis on that because from the previous presentations and from what I've heard here, one of the things that is being utilized is this idea of our historical places as representations of our identity, our national identity, our group identity. So the work that we have done in Shako Bottom is essentially the same kind of thing. As the references to history in the United States help us to see several things. The United States, the ideology and the rhetoric of the United States is that it is a land created for all people, that everyone is welcome, that it is a melting pot. And yet at the same time, the experience of Africans in the United States has been that they were deliberately and purposefully placed at the bottom of the social ladder in order that they could be most controlled so that their labor could be most useful to the development of the country. And that is a position that has been active in the United States ever since. So that at the same time that there have been different immigrant groups that have been able to come to the United States to find economic access and find economic freedom, for African Americans, that has been a struggle that has had to be engaged actively and has cost their lives at every stage of that process and continues to do so today, and is most publicly represented by the Black Lives Matter movement. So that the work that we do in Richmond specifically has been built around raising the visibility of the historic landscape of Black people in Richmond and in Virginia. And it's important in Virginia because Virginia is the state where the United States was in essence born. Right? It's where the first English landed and made their settlement and began their occupation of the New World in terms of the Atlantic coast. And so the first thing that they did was they moved in and they displaced the Indian population that was there, right? So you're talking about the first occupations, the first genocides, and the first attempt to use others' labor in order to enrich the invading population. Then the next step was to bring Africans very quickly. Within 100 years, the first Africans were brought there. Within 30 years, it is made law that Black people will be enslaved in perpetuity by virtue of their mother. So any enslaved woman giving birth, her children were automatically enslaved and were to remain slaves. Any children that they produced would be slaves and would pass that on each generation. After the Civil War and the end of slavery, technically in our country, new laws were passed in order to ensure that Black people remained a part of the labor force in the country. So laws that are typically referred to as Jim Crow laws are established by the end of the 19th century that codify and determine that Black people can only achieve so much in society before they are basically told by virtue of conditions that they cannot achieve any more than that. They cannot own too much more land than that. They cannot have much more wealth than that. before they are repressed to the point that they have to start all over again. The mass migrations of African-descended people from the south of the United States to the northern industrial cities in the 20th century represents an attempt by the group to find the jobs, to find the access that they could not find in the South, because the South reinterpreted agricultural enslavement from slavery to sharecropping. What becomes interesting for the racial dynamic of the United States about the sharecropping period is that sharecropping was when black people and white people at the lowest economic rungs of society were in essence working in the same conditions. But it was also the point at which they could really continue the tradition of creating the divisions between these working peoples. So if you convince poor whites that poor blacks are lesser than they are, that at the very least what they have going for them is their white skin, then they will never find a strong basis for unity. And we have seen that replicate itself in terms of the economic access that I've talked about, but also in terms of the way that the cities are constructed, in terms of the way that they are taught to relate to any new people coming into the country. So the United States is a very interesting place in terms of, on the one hand, having had relatively open doors to many, many different peoples, while at the same time, and in a similar dynamic in terms of having the greatest influence in either rural or poor places where the education is not as accessible and where it's easier to control the information that people receive, that new populations represent a threat. The first threat is economic. And then to ensure that that threat stays recognized, they tie it to ethnicity. And if you are browner, or if your language is less Latin-based, even, it's easier to do that. So there's a xenophobia, a xenophobic character to the social indoctrination of the United States that exists alongside of this idea that it is also a place of economic opportunity, which means it's always a readily available tool. And right now, we are seeing that tool being used. We've seen it exacerbated since the attacks on the World Trade Center in 2001. And it began this most recent period of Islamophobia. And it's that Islamophobia that our presidential candidate for the Republican Party, Donald Trump, is taking advantage of, but also others in his party have been taking advantage of. It is what has created an interesting kind of silence on the part of the Democratic Party, which then seeks to focus attention on foreign policy and act as though they are doing all of the right things in terms of domestic policy. The two incidents that have begun to bring these things to the fore and to help people outside of the United States understand that there's something deeply wrong inside the United States as well, I'll point to the killings of the Islamic students at the University of North Carolina. That was Dea Shadi Barakat, Yusur Muhammad Abdul Salah, and Razen Muhammad Abdul Salah. They were 3 students. They were Muslim. The only reason that they were killed, avowedly by the man who killed them, was because they were Muslim. Before that, there was the killing of 9 members of an historic African-American church in South Carolina, of the Emmanuel African Methodist Church, by a young man named Dylan Roof, who wore the emblems of the Confederacy in such a way that it reflected specifically the fact that it was the reassertion, that symbol represented the reassertion of the ideology of white supremacy in the United States, and specifically in the South. The city that we come from, Richmond, Virginia, was the capital of the Confederacy during the Civil War, from 1861 to 1865. During that time, not during that time, at the end of the war, That was a city that was liberated by the Union troops, and specifically led by a battalion of the colored, what they called the colored troops, or the African American troops.
Can I make 1 minute?
1 minute, thank you. Okay. Later, about 40 years later, the first of the major monuments that are on the most famous street in the city of Richmond was established. And that monument was literally the beginning of the reassertion of the ideology of white supremacy in Virginia, in Richmond. And its purpose was to remind black people that they occupied the lowest rung of the ladder, and that affluent white European-descended people represented the highest order of society. And that was something that they codified finally in 1924 with the Racial Integrity Act. And the Racial Integrity Act has language that was then subsequently transported to Germany and to the Nazi Party for its use. It was transported to South Africa to help with the evolution or the codification of the apartheid system. So we understand very clearly what these symbols represent in Richmond. In Richmond, they contribute, without people wanting to acknowledge it, to Islamophobia, both as represented visibly by people who appear to be Arabian or from the Middle East, but also from African Americans who brought their religion of Islam with them from Africa 400 years before. It is represented in what I'm going to say Latinophobia, right? A fear of immigrants from Mexico and South America. And it applies also, again, to the continued marginalization of the American Indian population in the United States. And I say all those things really to say that we work to reclaim this particular site in Richmond, Virginia, in order to change the landscape in Richmond, so that when you come to Richmond, Virginia, this birthplace of the United States, you will not simply see the ideology of white supremacy, but that it will be changed so that you can see all of these other histories that contribute and demonstrate that there is a lot of work that has gone on, a lot of work that needs to be done, and that we are, by virtue of all of that, an integral part of the struggle against ethno-nationalism and racism as a tool for social conflict around the world.
He's a human rights activist. Is it working? Yes. Yes. And I'm very happy to be here in Poland today, and to have on my neighbors Americans, Hungarians, Bosnians, and this is a very hopeful situation for all of us. So we are here. We are united, even if we do not reach now the big numbers of society, but it's coming. And well, I will speak about this subject, ethno-nationalism, which I mostly and most significantly experienced in Israel-Palestine, in the Israel-Palestine conflict. There is, it is in an everyday situation, an ethno-nationalism and religious situation, and it is going on since the creation of Israel, and as long as I said to myself, as long as we do not resolve this conflict in the middle of the Arab world, we will not go further, because this is the basic values. How do I say? Well, when we know what is going on in Palestine, we can see very quickly that this ethno-nationalism and religious integrism is a danger for the whole world. So, because I say this because I was several times in Palestine, and I said, well, as long as we cannot, as long as we the people in the whole world, we cannot resolve this conflict, we will have other conflicts adding to this conflict. And this is for me, it is the heart of the today's situation. And well, this is all what I want to say because I was not very well prepared. I just, when I came to Wroclaw, they told me to speak about this. So well, this is my contribution to this.
Quite recently that I will speak on this panel. So I'm not so well prepared either, but I will do my best. So I was lucky enough that the other speakers were focused more on concrete cases of ethno-nationalism, so it's safe for me to move a bit away from the concrete cases to the abstract terms of theory, and then to come back to some practical notions as well. Firstly, where I come from and where a colleague from Bosnia and all the colleagues from Bosnia come from, we formed that notion of ethno-nationalism, which is at first differed from the traditional form of nationalism, which is this civic bourgeois nationalism. And then you had this paradox where the Balkans in general was perceived as something very backwards, because this ethno-nationalism from the standpoint of civic nationalists was considered to be backward, was considered to be uncivilized. However, in the region of former Yugoslavia, where all these identities of religion, ethnicity and nationality are cross-cutting, it was practically impossible to build any kind of national state without conflicting other identities as well, such as religious and ethnic identities. So we have in the Balkans something which I would call clerical ethno-nationalism. And neither of these three categories is possible to be just subtracted from this concept. In general, when we talk about nationalism and ethno-nationalism and clerical ethno-nationalism, it is evident that these kind of identity politics and policy making are the most efficient tools for mobilization, for whatever political cause we choose. This is so, of course, because of still dominating the society in which we have class domination. In order to prevent class internationalization, in order to prevent people of the same class, of the lower classes of all our nations and states, to connect in order to challenge this domination, they have introduced this identity politics which would prevent this interconnection and internationalization of resistance. An interesting point, especially in this part of Europe, which is eastern part of Europe, or Central Eastern, is that after 1989, it was considered that the whole transformation of political and economic system was considered to be a transformation towards liberation, towards kind of national liberation. These were national movements for national dignity and so on and so forth. Taking into account the regimes which were established in this part of Europe, these were progressive movements which were demanding from one side democratization and from the other side national liberation. Which brings me to the topic of anti-imperialist nationalism, which might be considered progressive up to a certain point, or anti-colonial nationalism. But the trap of this kind of nationalism, which is anti-colonial and in its essence up to the point progressive, is that it is only an introduction into a different form, into another step of domination, but this time within the national framework. And this is why when we talk about anti-imperialist, anti-colonial nationalism, we have to be careful about this issue, because in order to liberate ourselves, we can conduct this national liberation struggle. In order to achieve freedom, we need a step step forward, because for freedom we need to abolish domination, and domination is not less strong if it's only within our national borders, unlike in the previous times when someone else from the abroad was dominating us. I would like to also talk a little bit about education that the colleague from Hungary mentioned. And of course this is a comrade disagreement on what you said regarding education, because I really think that it is precisely through education that ethno-nationalism and nationalism enters human mind. If you take into account, again, where we come from, and you will hopefully tell us more about Hungarian experience, it is precisely through the books of history, and it is precisely from the intellectual, so-called intellectual elite, that all these national nationalist impulses are coming from. It is precisely the well-educated and the kids who go to school who learn how to hate. It is education which provides those kids with hatred. So it can be, of course you're right that it is more likely that someone who doesn't go to school, who doesn't who doesn't communicate with others, and so on and so forth, is more likely to become less critical towards reality that is surrounding them. But then on the other hand, I think this issue is also important to be addressed. To come to another point of our discussion, which is racism. It is interesting, and the colleague from the US probably knows much more about the issue than myself. But an interesting thing is how, in general, in academia, in public discussions, racism is tend to be kind of distinguished from the class issue. Of course, many scholars do connect the two. But what comes to my mind first, if I want to really, put forward this in a very like authentic way, how race matters when we talk about class issues, is that Adolf Hitler in Mein Kampf, when talking about Jews, was talking about their class, them being wealthy. But the catch is that he thought that since he considered them to be a lower species, that he thought that they were cheating. So them as being lower or a lower species than other humans should have been much poorer than they really were. And this is what you can find in the book of Ishai Landa, which is called Liberal Tradition and Fascism. And the last 2 points are related to what I also heard from other speakers, the topics of Islamophobia, and related to Islamophobia, anti-immigration. First, anti-immigration. When we talk about the whole wave of anti-immigrant sentiment, which is now kind of overwhelming Europe, we talk about the fear from immigrants who are poor. We do not fear immigrants who would come to work in our hospitals and save lives of our people. We do not fear wealthy businessmen coming from, I don't know, Damascus to do business with our international companies. We don't fear immigrants in suits. We fear immigrants who would walk around the streets, homeless, and do harm to our people. Which again brings us to the class issue. And finally, Islamophobia, which is also an interesting thing that is now happening across these lines of ethnic, national, race divisions. It is interesting how liberals are trying to solve the problem of nationalist and conflicts along national and ethnic and religious lines. Instead of this kind of division between friends and enemies, what liberal thought is trying to do is to impose consensus. And this consensus is related to the consensus between national elites. So let's not do conflict, let's not do wars between us, national and not national elites, in order to do business. What Chantal Mouffe, for instance, suggests, unlike this concept of consensus, is the concept of agonism, which is not antagonism. So it's not in Schmittian terms friends and enemies, but simply people who disagree. We don't have to reach consensus. We can disagree and struggle politically for our ideas. And I think this is what we need today. Not to seek agreement with those we disagree with. There is nothing to be disagreed with I don't know, bureaucracy in Brussels. And same, there is nothing to be disagreed with Orban and with various other leaders in Europe. And this would be my last point. Thank you very much.
So as your critique, of course, the number of years, that matters. And the type of education also matters. It's even more important, the topic. I mean, when they say that the golden days were at those days between the two wars, when pensions are only received by very few people, but education for full class was free, the rest you have to pay for. Masses of people were not able to have any good type of education. Healthcare was equal. I don't have time to explain. And religion, that was also very dangerous. I mean, the numerus clausus, which was the registration of the Jews, 3 acts in the Hungarian parliament were made years before Hitler got on power. When the worker hours were not 8 hours, I mean, that was an achievement of the West throughout many years. And then the voting rights. Who had voting rights in those golden days? Women? No. Minorities? No. These were the golden days? Yes, for them. Because they are taking rights away from people and telling the majority that you are the true people who are supporting us. We are Hungarians.
In the socialist period, and now we are a very poor country with 10–15% of people in big misery. And how it happened, how it arrived to us. At the beginning, in the 70s, the class struggle was forgotten suddenly. And people thought that capitalism and socialism will converge. People thought that in the new society, debates, arguments will permit to find the way for an evolution of the life of the society. And people thought that the crude, brutal capitalism was over, and a lot of people forgot it immediately. The very success of socialism turned against us because the peace, the well-being of the majority of people made that the people thought that brutalism and war is over for Europe. Step by step, the capitalism appeared as a better society than the socialism, and the example was the richest country of the capitalist countries. So Germany, the United States, France, Austria was made as an example for us. And we forgot absolutely that this country was very rich because of the war, because of the colonization for several centuries before that. This view was developed especially by an intelligentsia which was not on the command, on the political command at that time. But step by step they came on the political command and they began to transform the society, and even in the 70s. First of all, the economy was turned to the exportations, and the indebtedness was, foreign indebtedness became more and more important. That means that with the exportation we had in competition with foreign companies, and always it was a semi-success. We was very proud that we are able to compete, but on the other hand we was always on the best, on the second best, and not on the first. And competition was important for the companies with foreigners, but inside the society also the competition against people became a value. Inequality became a value. We forgot that solidarity and equality was a huge value for everyone, and we thought that the best people have got a better salary. So it was a mentality transformation always. The collective life was maintained only for children and young, for the summer camps, but for the normal adult people, the objective goal in the life was the nice family, which became richest and richest. So it was important. The transition, in the transition process, this very naive view about the transformation was immediately forgot, disappeared, because of foreign actors, especially Americans, German, French, NGOs and state intervened directly in our country, very brutal. And special programs was made for the transitions and for the transformations. In Hungary it was named Blue Ribbon program. American, Hungarian American, German Hungarians, French Hungarians was made in command. Even in the ministry, American people was put as in was in Ukraine days, and the Soros Foundation, German Stiftungs was very actively intervening in our society. The first, I will mention only 2 or 3 steps. It was the first one. The office of clarification was immediately closed. The very successful agriculture sector, which was based on cooperatives, private farmings and state-owned structures, was destroyed immediately. And at the same time, the 8 years studies for the children was destroyed also. So now, for 40 years for the socialism, everyone has at least 8 years of common school. Now we have only 4 years of common school. Now we are a very poor country without any industrial or agricultural possibilities or capacities to survive on our own. We are dependent on Western companies. The low salary is the only productive factor of the country. Local capitalist was created, a local capitalist class was created from nothing to support this destruction process. And these local capitalists have common interest with foreign capitalists to exploit for the exploitation of people, and at the same time they are in competition with foreigners. Urban politics, Orban is very well known even in Occidental countries. Orban is the support for the local capitalist class against the foreign capital. He put before the family, the traditions, the religion, the nationalistic propaganda, and liberals, against which are very strongly fight against Orban. They are the strong support, they are the comprador bourgeoisie for the foreigners. So the structure is going like that. The real problem that the left forces are really weak, dispersed, confused, especially because the liberals called themselves leftists. To end this situation, because I have no more time, we have to vote either for local capitalists or for foreigner capitalists, but the leftist forces are without any strong presence. And how we can go out of this gap, of this catch? I think that we have to be brave and we have to propose new old demands. First of all, we have to propose against NATO and against the war and for the peace. It is a very important demand. The other one, I think that we have to fight against multinational companies. No one needs these huge companies all over the world which have very strong political power. Another proposal can be that we have to nationalize and at the same time rationalize the financial sector, banks, insurance, and the exchange business. And first of all, I think we have to put human emancipation and real social freedom as a demand about collective life, about the society. Yeah, thanks.
And so the second person is Piotr Szumlewicz, my Polish comrade. Piotr reprezentujesz OPZZ, tak? Związek Zawodowy OPZZ. And masz 7 minut.
Witam Państwa, mam mało czasu.
No. Jeszcze jeden panel jest! Panos! Na końcu.
Prima dei parti lei Monica, Daniela, te ma stamattina che non mi piace.
Pomyślę, że prawy sektor to to jest inicjatywa pracownicza, nasz to nie jest prawy sektor. Niestety jest konflikt.
Solidarità! Ale
А сейчас мы победим. Да.
Hop, hop. I'm sorry.
Idzie Tuba! Solidarność międzynarodowa! Solidarność międzynarodowa! Solidarność międzynarodowa! Solidarność międzynarodowa! Solidarność międzynarodowa! Solidarność międzynarodowa! Los pueblos unidos jamás serán vencidos. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. Los pueblos unidos jamás serán vencidos. Los pueblos unidos jamás serán vencidos.
Kırıldı.
Ya çok güzel.
Freedom, pardon, Kekoğlu! Freedom, pardon, Kekoğlu! Freedom, pardon, Kekoğlu! Faszyści! Burżuje! Wasz koniec się szykuje! Faszyści! Burżuje! Wasz koniec się szykuje! Karosun! Ameryka! Imperializm! Don't miss American imperialism! We will win! We are right! We will win! We are right! We will win! Raz, dwa, trzy, cztery, precz tym rządem do cholery! Raz, dwa, trzy, cztery, precz tym rządem do cholery! Raz, dwa, trzy, cztery, precz tym rządem do cholery!
Można, tak?
how to make it better. We need slogans, of course. We need program, that's for sure. We need ideology, but we need down-to-earth, everyday work. That can help a lot. Of course, because we have no finance and we have the voluntary work, so we have to work in a very logistic way. I will speak about a method that we had, let's say, invented around 1.5 years ago. It's not even 2 years ago that we have organized the SOM, which is the which is the organization helpers of the left. We only have 12 members. What we are organizing, 12 conferences in a year, and other 4 conferences outside of Budapest. We work together with trade unions, and we receive also the rooms of the trade unions. Everybody who is visiting our conferences have to pay from 100 to 500 forints, which is 30 euro cents to 1.5 euros, a contribution. And we give a lunch for everybody. The lunch is called the I'm taking and I'm contributing. Only the ones which have the money to take something from home have to contribute. But we eat normal bread, apples, what you have. But we also show a certain type of hospitality. We work together with the trade union of miners, coal miners, with the trade union of chemical workers, with the Hungarian Association of Trade Unions, which is the biggest organization on this field. So, if you look upon the people who are here, for example, Judith, where are you, Judith? She is responsible in this group to keep the contact with the NGOs, and she is responsible for the press. This gentleman here, Matthias, my comrade, he is doing a great job because he is keeping the contact with the international field and also with the trade unions. And I'm trying to use my organizational skills. For example, we have another Judith, we have several Judiths in this organization. She's responsible for the art and culture. And another one is responsible for the minutes, because in every meeting we have the minutes. And another one is responsible for the list of people that attended our meetings, and we are calling them again and again. We also work with the working class heritage, because between the 2 world wars there was a very strong workers class, so we live with their heritage and we try to re-establish it. So we always talk about it. In those years there was culture, a special culture for this working class, so we are trying to re-establish that. For example, also the 3 of us, the 3 of our delegation, are a member of a choir, a chorus. So we sing, so we are saying words, and in every meeting we start with something like that. Most people know these words. Most people can sing, so they are singing together with us. We tried it out yesterday also, out in the field. Every 2 weeks we have rehearsals, so we have to learn it again. And we have professional trainers who are helping us in order to do that. And of course we have weekly meetings on the Skype. Believe me, it's better than you are on the room, because you can select all the documents we are talking about. You can follow the minutes, you can follow the last year's meeting minute, and you can ask, what have you done? Have you fulfilled it? Should it be passed to the next week, or we can get along with it this way? Our organization had organized a festival last year, which was the Lettish Island Summer Festival. It was for 3 days. That was the first time. We had 400, 500, 600 people in the 3 days. So we think that that was a really success, but we want to organize a much bigger meeting this year. That's why we invite all of you. Of course, please don't forget, you have to pay. It will not be very expensive because, for example, for €1 you can eat, you can have a lunch. So we are practically doing everything by ourselves. But still, as we have no income, somehow we have to organize it. We have reserved already between 250 and 300 beds, the rest goes into the tents. So if you have tents and normally you're going camping, why don't you come to us, stay with us, and I think we will have a wonderful cultural event. Professional artists are also coming to our meeting. Of course, we're also not paying them. It's something very generous that they can come, and they are coming, and we have cultural programs, poems, singing, and everything else. And of course, we have to disseminate this information. Within Hungary, we have several press possibilities. For example, there is the Le Monde Diplomatique. Yes? We have an article there, let's say, every 2 days. In Hungarian, and mainly we translate articles, relevant articles from a lot of languages. And there is a network of people who are making the translation work. And then we have the transform, which is very important, because we have at least one article every day. And a lot of people are turning on it, reading it, they are on our list. And we have the Időnk, which is our times, and we have 2-4 articles a day, and in between 20,000-30,000 people are turning on it every day. So it is becoming a power. And there are, of course, other papers like the Esmélet, I don't even know how to translate it.
Consciousness.
Consciousness. You have to be conscious. That's a scientific paper. And with all these issues, we are trying to establish a regular work, because you must know that we have to input a lot of work into that. The monthly meeting was we organized at the trade unions of the coal miners has a name which is the changes, the system change we had to face. We had a lot of discussion about that. We are having these discussions, but we are analyzing the present situation. If there is any political activity which is national or international, it's very important. Of course, these topics are always coming in front, so we want to attract people to have more and more to come into our rooms. I also must say that we are working together with other parties, other political parties. Of course, the party family, which is nearest to us, is European Left Workers' Party 2006. But, unfortunately, we are not members to that party. But I think we are doing more work than most of the members of the party. But as we are independent, we can attract a little bit easier other people. For example, the former Communist Party, which is the present Socialist Party, has a left section. A lot of honest, good people, they are still in the party, and we have contact with that left section also. They are singing together with us, they are coming to our meetings, and a miracle happened a few weeks ago. They are also invited us. Of course, they are very lazy, I must say. They don't have regular meetings, they don't meet practically every day in telephone or in Skype, and they don't organize meetings like us. And we have a small green party, which is the PM. We also have some contact with, and with NGOs, like the FNA, which is the Unconditional Basic Income Group. We find it very useful working together with them, and also they have quite a lot of people around them. And what can we achieve? For example, 2 weeks ago we had a local election of a mayor. It had been mentioned many times that the Fidesz party won with a 2/3 majority. They had 8 million voters, they got 2 million votes, and they had a 2/3 majority. A very funny election system. This means that before, I still have 3 more minutes. Wonderful. That means that before you have to re-establish democracy on some level in order to build up everything up. So individually the different groups cannot win. But after that, of course, we can divide and we can go for our reasons, for our ideology. But this time we were working together. We were going to the election with 4 leftist parties. One was really liberal, one is, let's say, social democrat or left liberal, they are the socialist party. There was a non-governmental organization, us, and it happened. We had 20% more vote than the second party, which was Fidesz. So, I'm not saying that we can do it everywhere. But this was, I think, a very hopeful result. And it was also good to work together with the socialist parties people. We were organizing separate meetings, going to every house, every bus station, every elevator. You cannot do it in any other way. And of course, if I would have more than 3 minutes, I could talk about the translation network, about Facebook networks, about the exhibition. I mean, what a miracle. We have an exhibition in an official Hungarian museums until the end of June about the heritage of the working class between the 2 world wars. And when we were at the opening, we couldn't enter. I couldn't because I'm more than 100 kilos, but we couldn't enter the main room because it was so crowded. People are interested in this. And I know that you're looking at me. Lastly, I call your attention that when you go home, turn on the television, and because in Tuesday, there will be a national holiday in Hungary about the 1848 revolution, and of course left and right are making big commemorations and festivities, but in the left camp I do hope that there will be 50,000–60,000 people at least, and one of the speakers is belonging to us, so we are very proud. And we want to show the world that we can change step by step, and for that you need to do the everyday work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Walter Dorot, please.
Hello. My name is Val. I'm from Bulgaria. And I'd like to talk about how to get the message across. There was a lot of talk here these 2 days about the problems, the critique of the system, how bad is the situation in this or other Eastern European country, but very little talk about the real alternative models of neoliberal capitalism. And this is something that interests me for a long time. I myself am involved with, with the movements, with the activism since 1990s, and I started with the Indie Media Network, which did a great job, but then it disappeared. Then I was involved with the anti-war movement, and we couldn't stop the war that started in Iraq. And then I was involved with the World Social Forum in 2005. I was in Porto Alegre in Brazil. Great people were there, Lula, Chavez, 120,000 people, transformational experience. And somehow, still exists today, but it's not even in the menus. So around that time, I started thinking about real alternatives, how we can live and show other people the change that we're talking about. And it took me a while to realize that such attempts exist. There are many different levels. Some people that do them, they don't even call them like that. But some people do. I have a slideshow here that is going there. I won't talk directly about what you see there, but these are pictures from intentional communities and eco-villages across Europe, which we visited last summer, and I shot a documentary about them. But the main reason for this is to show in this documentary and talks in Bulgaria and places like that, that there are communities that live the dream, and some of them are really living the utopian dream that we're talking about. Most of these places that you see here, actually all of them, they consider them egalitarian, which is a left-wing value. Some of them are ideological, some of them, I think even the one that you're seeing here in Italy, Lebanon actually is formed by communists and Marxists, which lived there since 1979. Other are more spiritual. Many of them, especially in Spain, are connected to the anarchist movement. But what is important, they prove a real social laboratory on a small scale how the changes can occur. In Bulgaria, we also felt the need for something like that because, like most of the Eastern European countries who lived in the so-called real socialism, now there's a very negative connotations with the ideas about anything that is left-wing, anything that is socialist, and anything that is even communal. When you use the word communal, you face this kind of prejudice. Oh, really? It was communism. We're done with this. We're living in a new world. So, like Gandhi said, I think that this kind of a small spots or islands in the system, in the cracks of capitalism, they really can become the knots of the new network of really existing models that can prove to be self-sustainable and to provide the quality of life that actually people strive for. Because if you think about it, no matter how much we complain, no matter how much we talk about the problems of the system, unless, and even if you talk about alternatives, unless we show these real alternatives, people don't believe it, or at least most of the people. And this is the issue that I want to address. At forums like this one, we understand each other very well. Probably 80–90% of everything is said by other people we already heard or we already think. The real struggle is to get these messages across to other people. I personally, 5 years ago, decided that I'll try a very ambitious project to create a whole movie, full-length movie, which is a really fictional movie, not just the talking heads or the lecture, and it shows such a world. I mean, the movie is called Bulgaria, This Eternal Heresy. The whole movie is produced totally outside of the system, only with people that are comrades that gave their resources, their free time, and it shows a vision of a village that actually doesn't exist in Bulgaria. We call it Dolfinovo, but which became like a symbol of what could exist, based again on the values of justice, equality, direct democracy, solidary economy. I have the movie with me, by the way, and if people are interested, it's translated in English, it's translated in Russian, it has Russian also, in Spanish. It was nominated surprisingly in Bulgaria for the Bulgarian Film Academy Awards for directing and cinematography, which shows that this kind of attempts can open doors to other people. In Bulgaria, where it's extremely difficult, to gather more than, 40 people and to have a meeting like that, or even to have standing demonstrations. Usually the demonstrations of all the so-called left people in Sofia are smaller than the one that we had here. And when I go to Athens or I hear your numbers, I realize that other countries is different. But media projects like this one, that I'm talking about, Bulgaria's Eternal Heroes, which again is a fictional movie, and I have a clip that I can play after it, it's just like 2 minutes. Or this slideshow that you see here, which I'm turning into a documentary, if it is supplied with the sufficient hooks for discussion, can be extremely successful. The movie itself that I'm talking about really has a very simple plot. It's shot like a combination between documentary and fiction. So that's why it can be shot very cheaply, on a low scale, and still look very good and accessible for the majority of people shown in the main movie theaters in Sofia and also in Spain. It brought thousands of people and sparked discussions because in the movie itself, a young guy who's a saxophone player with his girlfriend, and she's a gypsy dancer, so we have issues there about, feminism, ethnic problems in Bulgaria, very strong about the Roma minorities. They moved to Bulgaria trying to find this utopian village Dolfino, and they go through different stages of searches that young people consciously or unconsciously do all the time. They get engaged in the beginning with some community of deep green anarchists. After that, they go to a monastery in Bulgaria. Many young people turn to religion, other spiritual thinking locations. But ultimately, what happens with them is that they found in the last 1/3 of the movie this place, Dolfino, which is totally constructed by different existing places in Bulgaria, when they can hear the whole paradigm of living in a social world where the deep values of economy and culture and societal practices are reversed to the neoliberal capitalism. And the people in this village, they talk about it. They say, we found a way, to create new seeds in the cracks of capitalism. These things spark enormous discussions, and again with people that otherwise you couldn't engage. And I find this experience very rewarding, and I want to share it with you because I believe that the people on the left can do much more. I've seen some attempts, especially in Spain, for similar rich media products, but most of them, they remain on the level of talking heads, and they're frankly too boring.